For some time now, The Day Before has been Steam's #1 most wishlisted game, which is kind of insane when you consider that it's a brand new IP coming from a fairly unknown developer. Fntastic is a studio that up until recently had only ever made small, early access indie titles that they abandoned, and a mobile game. Their most recent release, Propnight, isn't doing particularly hot at the moment either. So for them to all of a sudden have a game in development that more people want than any other upcoming game on Steam, it's kind of crazy. Currently, more people are interested in The Day Before than A Plague Tale Requiem, Arc Raiders, Nightingale, Marvel's Spider-Man, Modern Warfare 2, Stalker 2, even Starfield, a brand new zombie game from an unknown developer. More people are interested in that than in Starfield. Now that could be an argument for where Starfield's at. I think it's clearly a testament to how much desire still exists for the zombie survival genre that's been unfulfilled within the gaming community, but also how much gameplay trailers with decent looking graphics can really sell the idea of a game to people. But I beg of you, as much as you may want this to be an amazing next-gen zombie survival PvP MMO, which is what they're calling it, please temper your expectations. The red flags are so numerous, I have lost count of the number of concerning issues around this game and around its developer, but I don't know, let's try adding them up, shall we? Starting with the developer. These are the people who are making the game, so goes without saying that their history is a fairly important thing to consider. Fntastic is a studio that was founded back in 2015 by two brothers who, according to their mission statement, dreamed of creating a global organization that would work on world-class games. With that objective in mind, they began work on their very first title, The Wild 8. The Wild 8 was a top-down survival action game set in the frozen wilderness of Alaska. Players could go around gathering resources, fighting creatures, building, crafting. You know, it was the standard survival shtick. Now, initial reception was fairly positive, with the game scoring some decent reviews when it first entered early access in February 2017. However, things turned south very quickly. Shortly after the early access launch, Fntastic sold the rights to the game to their publisher. Why? Well, according to them, we sold The Wild 8 to our publisher. This decision was very hard for us because our team was hoping to always evolve the game. The Wild 8 is our debut project. It brought us first success and valuable experience, but nevertheless, because of internal conflict with partners within the company, we had to sell the project to the publisher. We will always love The Wild 8. It's in our hearts. So the explanation that they gave for why they had to sell The Wild 8 just a few months after it entered early access was due to internal conflict with partners within the company, whatever that means, and why ever that would mean they would have to sell the rights to their game. Or it could be, and hear me out here, it could be due to the fact that just a couple months after the early access launch, the player base had already dropped down to an average of just 100 concurrent players. So after collecting the money from the game's initial sales and realizing that the game really wasn't going anywhere, they decided it was best to just stop supporting it altogether, get a little bit more extra cash by selling its rights, and then just move on to their next thing, which was Dead Dozen, a first-person multiplayer horror game where players and teams of 4 would try to survive the depths of a mysterious pyramid infested with ghouls. Dead Dozen released into Steam Early Access on March 7th, 2018. This was just 1 year after the early access release of their prior title, and it was less than 6 months after they sold it off. However, unlike The Wild 8, this game didn't even start on a positive note, getting mostly negative reviews for being full of bugs, having poor performance, constant crashes, and, well, just not being particularly good. The player count peaked on launch day at 81 concurrent players, and it was down to 14 players just 1 week later. So what did Fntastic do when their second attempt at making a game immediately bombed? Well, you guessed it. They abandoned ship. In June 2018, a mere 3 months after their early access launch, they posted this announcement. We apologize for the lull that has been lately. It's time to take stock of the development of Dead Dozen because from today we stop supporting the game. Why? Let's take a look at the situation in detail. They then posted a pie chart, which as you can clearly see, tells us absolutely nothing in detail at all. And then they went on to say, unfortunately, the budget ended on April 1st. Of course it ended on April Fool's Day. We were not able to realize much of what we were planning. There are still small bugs and not enough content. But even if we stayed on the development of this project, we must admit that we cannot solve the problem of low online in a short time without changing the core of the game. This could not be done either by Cliff Bleszinski or Paragon with their colossal resources and huge team. So their budget was up, and if Cliff Bleszinski couldn't save Paragon, there ain't no way that Fantastic is going to be saving the Dead Dozen. They did, however, keep the game live and available for purchase for a few more years, up until recently in October 2021 when it was finally removed from Steam. Oh, and a fun little side note about Dead Dozen here. On the About page on Fantastic's website, where they detail their history as a studio, there is a noticeable gap in the timeline where Dead Dozen should be. They just don't even mention having ever made the game, which, you know, I don't blame them. It was pretty awful and basically nobody played it. Hey, I mean, geez, I'm tempted to delete 90% of my back catalog here on YouTube. But you know what? No, it's part of my journey. Bad videos and all. So for those of you keeping track at home, in the span of 18 months, just a year and a half, they released 2 games into early access, collected the money for both of them, and then abandoned both of them. On to the next thing. 1 month after halting development on Dead Dozen, they released Radiant One, a story-driven adventure game for mobile devices. Not a whole lot to say here. It's a phone game, and apparently, according to reviews, it's only 20 to 30 minutes long, so let's just say it's a relatively small-scale experience. Now, we fast forward a few years to December 2021. During a live stream event for their highly anticipated title the day before, Fantastic also revealed and released a surprise new game. It's called Propnight. They had evidently been developing this simultaneously with the work they were doing on the day before. And to put it simply, it is a hybrid of Prop Hunt and Dead by Daylight. So how is the game done, you may be wondering? Well, currently, Propnight has a mixed rating on Steam, with some recent reviews saying the game is struggling, is full of bugs. Others said that it even has more bugs now and even worse bugs than it did at launch, that the game is poorly balanced, and that as of recently, because the population has dropped so low, people are reportedly waiting up to 10 minutes to get into a single match. According to SteamDB, the daily concurrent count of players right now hovers between 200 and 400, which isn't completely dead, but it is certainly not thriving, and is a far cry from the nearly 5,000 all-time peak that they had on launch day. I guess to their credit though, they have continued to update the game. It's still getting new patches. They're even doing a visual overhaul. Although I do wonder if this would still be the case if they didn't have the spotlight that they now have on them because of the anticipation for the day before. I mean, there's no way to know for sure, but if their history was any indication, there's a chance that this game could have also joined the abandoned pile, but you know. So just to recap here, to date, Fantastic's track record looks like this. February 2017, they released the Wild 8 into early access. Later that year, they sell the game's rights, cashing out and move on to their next project, that project being Dead Dozen, which they released into early access a year later in March 2018. The game completely flops, and then 3 months later, they halt any further development. A month after that, they released the Radiant One, a 20 to 30 minute phone game. Then in 2021, they released Propnight. Currently, that's averaging around 300 players and has mixed ratings on Steam. So that has set the stage. Now you know the background and the history of the developer, of the people making the game that everyone's looking forward to the day before. Now let's talk specifically about the day before. This was first announced in January 2021 as an open world survival MMO set in a deadly post-pandemic America that has been overrun by flesh-hungry infected. The game was said to be set in a huge detailed open world with large cities and towns, mountains and forests, all of which are full of homes and stores and skyscrapers and various other buildings and places that could be explored and looted. We will have to scavenge for resources, tools, and weapons to fend off the PvE threat of zombies, but also other players, as the game will have a PvP focus as well. There will be survivor colonies where we could go to trade, communicate, and team up with others. And they said that their goal with this game is to bring big innovation to the long stagnant survival MMO genre. Immediately after this trailer came out, there was a ton of hype. The announcement trailer that was released by IGN has about 4.5 million views to date. And at the time, many people in the YouTube community expressed a lot of excitement and enthusiasm, which generally I am all about. Gaming, I mean, yeah, it's a hobby that's supposed to be fun after all, so why not? Let's get pumped. And that was my gut reaction here too. A new open world zombie survival MMO with PvP. The trailer had solid looking visuals, very reminiscent of like The Division and The Last of Us, which I liked. Sweet, dude, sounds good. And yet, at the same time, I felt like something was a bit off. And now, at first I couldn't put my finger on exactly what it was, but something seemed kind of too good to be true. It was at that point that I started digging into the developer's history and those first red flags began popping up, which if you've been following the video so far, now you are aware of all of those details as well. But even putting the developer's past works and their actions aside, something about that first trailer didn't seem honest. But I'm no developer, and I can only glean so much information from watching a trailer. Fortunately, some real-life game developers also raised some early concerns. These next couple of clips were taken from a video titled Developers React to the Day Before. In it, we see Chase Colazzi, a producer at Riot Games, and Walter Hochbrechner, who spent 23 years in the gaming industry working most for Spheroid Productions. Here are some of their first impressions.
Is this in game?
The Day Before.
It is.
Oh my.
I'm getting very The Division vibes from this.
Wow, the shadows are incredible. The lighting is just excellent.
Told you,
Look at
show
this.
reflections.
Oh man.
In an MMO though, I'm skeptical.
How can they do that? I'm getting a feeling this has all been rendered. This is not.
I think it's more of a vertical slice on first impression.
Yeah.
A vertical slice, if you don't know, is this doesn't mean that the whole game is done and it looks like this. This is probably a section that they popped out and we're able to develop and carve out and make certain things look final when they're not. That's what happened with Watch Dogs. That's what happened with Cyberpunk for a lot of it. So I'm a little skeptical.
Now, their main takeaway here seems to be that this looks way too good for what the developer is calling it to be an open world MMO, and that this is either because A, it is just a vertical slice, a small section of the game that they made specifically for the trailer, or B, because it's all pre-rendered, aka it's not actual gameplay. Either of which seem very likely, but that second point is one that a lot of other people have picked up on since. In fact, every bit of gameplay that they've released so far seems like it's not actual gameplay, but rather is pre-scripted footage masquerading as gameplay. Also, it's all seemed very small in scale, with the environments being fairly closed off in a degree that makes it appear not to be open world at all, but I'll touch on that later. They also made this point here.
Things are about to get heated.
Over here.
Here's the thing, and this is why I think it's pre-baked.
Yeah.
See, that's supposed to be another player.
Right.
Can we go back? See the way they come in? It looks like it's an animated character that's not another player, but that means that those can't actually be other players.
It could be. It could very well be they have their own, AI players.
To move like that, they would have to be AI, because if it was a real player, the animation wouldn't be that smooth. When you actually play a game, you're kind of jittery.
So based on the character's movement, they believe it's not very likely that it's actually a real player controlling the character as it is implied to be in the video. They specifically say there's more players coming, which again lends further credit to the idea that this entire trailer was just pre-baked. But let's go ahead and move on from that first initial trailer. In the following months, they released a few short clips, 20 to 30 second videos showing off various aspects and some areas in the game. And then in April, we got this countryside video. This was the longest bit of extended day before footage that we have seen so far. It opens up with a Jeep driving through some mud, arriving at a gas station where they had to stop due to a flat tire. They then get out and we get to see some combat as they fend off a few zombies, and then they search around for loot, eventually finding the materials needed to fix the flat tire. Pretty cool mechanic, honestly. With the Jeep in working order, they drive further down the road, arriving at a clearing with a farm in the distance. They sneak through the field, doing a bit of stealth, going into the house, failing to disarm an alarm system, then alerts a bunch of zombies. They fight them back, and at the end, we see what we are assuming to be a group of players arrive in a few vehicles, which force the duo into the bunker. This trailer, like the first one, was actually pretty impressive in a lot of ways. Although, also like the first one, I get the sense that it's not actually gameplay and is just pre-rendered. And you might be asking yourself, like, who cares, right? What's the point of harping on whether or not this is gameplay or pre-rendered, whether it is actually a player playing, it's still footage of the game, right? It's still stuff that's in engine. Well, frankly, the biggest issue that I have with seeing what seems to be pre-rendered fake gameplay is that they just don't want to show us the real in-action footage and what it looks like, because what the game actually looks like when it's running with real people playing probably won't look nearly this good, or it won't perform nearly as well, because you can fake great visuals with good performance by just not showing actual live gameplay and just rendering all your stuff within your engine. And that is the number one issue that I have with what we're seeing, is that it won't be at all representative of the final product once real people are in and playing the game. We've been hoodwinked by this time and time again with early quote gameplay trailers that look nothing like the final product, and I am fairly confident that that is also what we're getting here. And all of this is not even touching on the fact that everything that they've shown, it looks super linear and not even remotely open world. They are billing this as not only an open world game, but as an MMO, which the assumption there is that there are going to be a lot of people in an open world game. The only area that looked even relatively open was the field that they sneak through in this video, but even that seems like a pretty confined space with bordered by this tree line that appears to be impassable. If you go back and look at the intro, the driving on the road, look at those areas around the gas station with the fencing and those thick line of trees, it all looks clearly very confined with solid borders that you are not able to cross. This is all just judging from a trailer, but the layout of it, the appearance of it, seems to be mostly tight corridors that we are walking or driving through. And hey, you know what? Linear games are totally cool. I love them, but they're calling this an open world game and they're calling it an MMO. And from everything they've shown, I am not convinced that that's what they've actually made. So call it something else if it's something else. After this trailer, a few more months go by, and then in October, we get the release date trailer, which showed a bunch of short clips showing various in-game stuff. This was pretty jam-packed and was pretty good looking. We saw shots of a city and its downtown, of a countryside and forest. We got clips of what looked to be one of the social hubs with what I'm assuming is a lot of players hanging around. We see a group of players walking through the streets, taking on some zombies, and then exploring this insanely good looking, super highly detailed shopping mall. They also show off some player housing with this little home being upgraded and decorated. We see some weapon customization with a mounted gun having its attachments changed. This was a very good looking trailer. I mean, it looks amazing. And that was pretty much it for trailers and reveals for the day before. In between, there was a couple of other things, like a 2-minute combat trailer where they showed some PvP in the streets, an NVIDIA RTX showcase video, as well as some screenshots and clips here and there. But beyond what they've shown of the game, there have been a few more developments around the game. For one, the day before was originally set to release on June 21st of this year. However, 1 month prior, in May, they announced a delay, saying that they were changing engines from UE4 to UE5, and that the game would now be scheduled to release on March 1st, 2023. I've heard conflicting reports about how easy or not it is to swap from one Unreal Engine version to another. Some people say it's fairly quick, like the snap of a finger, you push a button and everything's converted. Other people have said, and I've seen some people, industry people say, like developers say, seeing a last minute engine swap like that announced 1 month before the original release date is a very bad sign and pretty foreboding for what's to come. Also, and this is a strange one, not too long after announcing this delay, their official website randomly went offline. And I'm not talking about like for an afternoon. Their site was down for multiple weeks. It just directed you to this like login page. It was very strange, and I never saw it officially discussed as to why or how this happened. Not a big deal, just an interesting thing of note. But the most recent breaking news around this developer and their game is that they've been actively searching for unpaid help to work on the title, helping with things like translation and other tasks and activities. You know, people volunteer for stuff all the time, right? Like unpaid interns, they are a thing, whether we consider that good or not. And also community-built mods where people don't get paid are also a thing. This isn't some unheard of concept, but still, I feel like aware of the fact that this is the #1 most wishlisted game on Steam, not a good look that they're actively soliciting for people people to work on this for free. You're gonna get free help on a game that's so highly anticipated and that's also an open world MMO. What are the odds that that's gonna be great work if it's people who are just able to work for free? This is not a common occurrence in the games industry. You have a big budget game like this that's the #1 most wishlisted game on Steam, you should be paying people, and that brings us up to the other concern. Why are they not paying people? Do they not have the funding? With the anticipation behind this title, one would assume that they could easily find investors and get people to pay money so that they can pay the people working on it. I know being wishlisted itself doesn't bring in any money, but those metrics should certainly be enough proof to get people interested in spending money on the project, in investing. And if they are having trouble getting funding for the game, I have to wonder if that's because what they are showing potential investors just isn't looking good. Unpaid help, volunteering for things in various aspects in and outside of gaming, it's a totally reasonable thing, but they should be paying people being so highly anticipated. And if they can't pay people, that is yet another red flag amongst a pile of red flags. And I want to say here, we've touched on a lot of aspects. We've touched on the developer's history. We've touched on just some concerns with what they've shown of the game itself. But specifically, when we look back at their prior games, I want to note that having made bad games in the past does not mean that they can't make a good game in the future. I would say that Propnight, if nothing else, at least seems somewhat competent. It does appear to be a functioning game that some people have derived some enjoyment out of. So they seem to have at least delivered that with their most recent release. But also remember that it has been less than a year and the game already sits at a mixed rating with a dwindling player base. But I think the real issue here isn't even the quality of the games that they've made so far, but their decision making and their actions around those games. Selling and then abandoning their first 2 titles almost immediately after their early access releases, hiding the fact that they've made certain games on their website. They even, I didn't mention this, but they deleted all of those games' trailers from their developer channel. It used to be full of trailers for Dead Dozen and Wild 8. They deleted all of those because they don't want to be associated with their prior work. And then most recently, the fact that they're actively searching for unpaid help while simultaneously being the most anticipated game on the largest PC platform. Just about every move that this developer has made since its inception in 2015 should leave us very skeptical on the likelihood that they will deliver and live up to the hype of being the most wishlisted game on Steam. I want a good next-gen open world survival zombie MMO as much of the rest of you. I still think it is a genre in gaming that has a lot more potential and, well, just a lot more potential. There should be more games, more good games made in this genre. And I get the hype, but as good as you may think that these trailers have looked, even with all the issues that I've pointed out, as good as those trailers do generally look, if we were taking bets, I would not put any money on the day before delivering. That's all I'm saying. That's gonna do it for today's video. As always, thank you all so much for watching. Hope you enjoy the content. I'll see you in the next one. Take it easy.